If there's any objections for the member of the public, they can be invited not to speak or leave the meeting. So today, I'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everybody please rise, face the flag, and join me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I will call this meeting to order and introduce myself as Chairman Craig Westover, and I'm present for the meeting. To my left, Major Reed, would you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, I'm Major Reed from the State Police.
Okay.
I'm Patricia McFadden, Court Administrator from Chester County.
Okay. John.
John Bruno, Vice Chairman, Constable Dauphin County.
Okay.
Bud Pites, Constable, Allegheny County.
Okay. So that would indicate we have a quorum to run the meeting today. So I'd ask Sherry Leffler to introduce those members of PCCD.
I'm Sherry Leffler, Supervisor for the Constable's Education and Training Program.
Tracy Beaver, Constable's Training Program Staff.
John Fowl, Manager of the Bureau of Training Services, PCCD.
And then off screen, we also have Nick Hartman, Constable staff as well. I believe on the call, we have Megan Staub, our Curriculum Manager, Dorothea Jacobelli from the Office of Financial Management, Diane Morgan, Assistant Legal Counsel, and Deborah Sanford, Chief Counsel for PCCD. Anyone else on there, Tracy, that I may have missed?
Teresa Ford.
Hey, Teresa Ford. Thank you, Teresa. Tracy just saw your name. Teresa Ford, the Manager for the Office of Financial Management as well. Any other PCCD staff that I didn't mention?
Yep. Good morning, Sherry. This is Sally Barry. I'm not sure if you mentioned me or not.
I did not. Thank you, Sally, for speaking up.
Good. Then I would ask any training delivery contractors to identify themselves over here.
Good morning, Tony Luongo, Temple University Criminal Justice Training Programs.
Okay. And do we have anybody online, training delivery contractors?
Tony Muhal, the Constable Education Training Coordinator in State.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it. Okay.
Good morning. This is Steve Sheilo from Penn State as well.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Anyone else on the training delivery side? Okay, just a quick reminder to ask everyone to speak loudly and clearly throughout the meeting, and remember to keep your mics muted if you're not speaking. Appreciate that. It gives us a lot of feedback that we don't need on the sound. All right, so we've got through the introductions and want to move to action items. So the first action item today is going to be the unapproved minutes of the August 11th, 2022 meeting, and I would refer to Nick Hartman for that.
Thank you, Chair Westover. The unapproved draft minutes for the August 11th, 2022 meeting can be found on pages 2 through 11 of the board packet. Are there any changes, or would the board like me to read anything out loud?
Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? All board members? Okay, any questions for Nick? Or any changes, anything that you're contemplating? Okay, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes then.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Recognized by the Vice is making a motion. Second, recognized Trish.
Yep.
Trish Moran. Okay. Makes a second. Do we have any comments from the public? Hearing none, then I'll ask for a roll call vote by member. Major Reed.
Aye. Yes, I vote.
Aye.
Mm.
Trish.
Aye.
Chairman Westover, aye.
John Bruno, aye. Bud Pites, aye.
Okay. And the motion passes. Very good. Very good. All right. We're going to move then to our next action item, which is going to be the unapproved financial report for the November 3rd, 2022 meeting. And I would refer to Dorothy.
Good morning. So I believe the approving last quarter's fiscal report is an action item.
Yes.
Correct.
Were there any questions about last quarter's?
Well, I do want to open up a discussion on it because I want to refer the members to page, let me find it here.
So are we referring to the fourth quarter report from 20, or this quarter's report?
Well, I want to look at the constable fee collections specifically, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. So on the constable fee collections, on your report, you're showing that for 22 into 23 September, looks like you're showing a $349,090.44. And of course, we now have the report out for December, March, or June going into next year. But I'm looking at that against what we had the year prior, which was $301,721.85 in that quarter. So I can see that, up until the pandemic, we were running in the $400,000 ballpark for collections coming in. And of course, with the pandemic, things tailed off to 216,000. And we've made some recovery through 21, 22, and then into the 22, 23. Is the revenue is coming through the pipeline now? How often are we getting the money that's coming through? Because I'm looking at a potential shortfall, coming up within the next couple of years, and I'm just trying to really get a good handle on, do we believe, that our projections are somewhat accurate, because you're projecting for fiscal year 22, 23, 1.3 million.
Correct. So those projections are based on, although the revenue that has come in for the first quarter is higher than prior quarter last year for the first quarter, we're still not certain of what the new nature or the new trend is going to be. I'm not comfortable saying that that increase is going to be a trend throughout the fiscal year. So we've opted for a more conservative revenue projection, just because there's a new nature to your revenue stream because of the nature of the court, the way the court conducts business. Some counties use constables for these services. Other counties use sheriffs, whether for preference or for availability. And we're just trying to be conservative in our revenue projections so that we can not run into trouble in the future.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to find out, and maybe this information better asked of Mr. Powell, but do we see a correlation between the number of certified constables we actually have working now and what our revenue is that's coming in? Are we seeing some sort of a trend?
Well, we saw a drop. During COVID, we lost roughly 200, 250 as far as guys maintaining their certification.
With the election as well.
Well, the election, and I know staff has heard from constables during that time period who they were coming up for reelection. They chose not to, be reelected or run again, or they just resigned during COVID and all the shutdowns. So, of course, we trained about 130 roughly new constables this year, and we have potentially another 240 or so for next year. So we'll see, do those constables, pick up work? And we know there are counties that don't use constables for maybe criminal stuff. I know Westmoreland County, talking to an MDJ out there, they can't find constables. Their work's backing up. And part of that is, how many guys hung it up, retired, or whatever. And so I think it's going to take into next year to see, do these new constables coming on board, does that pick up? Do they pick up more court work, or do the courts adjust and just end up, do we only end up with roughly 800 constables working? I think we're not going to know that till into next year, because the guys who just got trained and certified this year, please make sure your phones are muted. We're getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, please mute your mics or your cell phones, but we're getting a lot of back feed.
So I think until we get this new batch of constables, into the system, working for MDJ. As you know, it takes some time. You know, if a guy who just got certified, say this summer, he may not get much routine work, you know, until this fall or even into next year, because he's got to, you know, get into good graces with an MDJ or whatever. So I think seeing that bounce back of losing constables, the court shutting down, I don't think we'll see a real impact till next year.
Okay.
I mean,
Well, the reason I'm trying to pin this down is because on those projections, I want to make sure that we're being trying to nail down as much as we can, that it's realistic on the money coming in. Because as I look at what's being projected out 26, 27, we're going to be back down around 717,000 for our, our bank account. And we know before in 2018, when we went through this exercise with the work groups and made a decision to charge for basic training, that was to bail us out of that financial shortfall was going to happen around 2021. And that was without knowledge of the pandemic or anything else. But the decision was made at that time to the board to charge for basic training. And what I want to find out today is from each board member, what's your thought process going forward, knowing that we're looking at about 3 years down the road of being financially insolvent again? Do we want to take act, do we want staff to work up recommendations for charging Con Ed, charging, the annual training also in order to help keep the program solvent? Or do we allow the financial program to crash and burn and hope for a bailout by the General Assembly? And that's sort of the question that I wanted to try to get answered today, is because there's going to be a fair amount of time for staff to work up recommendations to come up with how much money you would actually need to charge, each constable in order to keep the program financially going. And so that's what I want to find out today from the board members. What's your thought process going forward? What should we be telling staff to do?
well, and one thing I want to point out, Mr. Chair, is the board also, that's when we eliminated firearms training, 20 hours. And that saved us about $740,000 a year. That was one of our most expensive training events because it's, manpower intensive, and et cetera, et cetera. So that put a bunch of money back, so to speak, into the coffers for a little bit.
But at the cost of, what are we seeing as firearms instructors and staff members going out to your firearms training? What are you seeing as far as the quality of individuals being able to draw their firearm, get it successfully on target, and actually hit the target?
Right, and failures on firearms are up.
Yeah, failure rates are up. We're seeing other issues, right? You've all been out to to see what's going on out there. And so, once again, not just totally looking at it as a financial thing to keep the program going, but also at some point trying to bring firearms training back into the loop here, because right now it's a show and shoot, and that's what we've got. And so, Major Reed, what's your thoughts? What's your thoughts going forward, what we should do here?
I think it's probably a good idea to get the ball rolling and start looking at the options of what we can do with the costs.
Okay. Chris, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question you're asking is whether or not we should be approving recommendations being made by program staff,
Well,
correct?
it's for us to draft up something, at
Right.
least for you to start looking at.
Yeah, I agree with the Major. I think, just because we have to be fiscally responsible. But I'm also curious, and I believe we've had these discussions previously about if there's any other funding source or any funding streams that we might be able to request from the legislature. I don't know what the feasibility of that is, but I think that's also have to be part of the discussion. Because, just watching what's been going on out in the districts, and it's not that the constables aren't, really working hard. It's the fact, like, for example, I know in my own county, our constables are now having to prioritize what work they're doing because we are so short-staffed in our own county where, 5-6 years ago, we had plenty of constables that were actively working those warrants and they're now prioritizing their ability to work just to do transports. So, just even, I'd like to say Chester County has always been very good about collections for the CETB. But it's just a matter of,
It's volume.
correct.
Yeah.
And so I think again, we need to look at all available options, but I think, I agree with you, Chairman, that I think we may have to make some drastic choices moving forward if we're gonna keep this, this training program afloat.
Michael Bruno, your thoughts?
Okay, I have many. What I think we should probably do, and I'm not so sure we've done this in the past, is actually draft a letter at this point in time to the General Assembly, to the leadership as a board. Have we ever done that? Have we ever let them know of our current dilemma, our current journey? Now, I know I have spoken with 2 or 3 over the past year extensively about exactly what we needed, and even bringing up the deputy sheriffs also had dilemma, who was remedied last year, I do believe. So Representative Delosier, who sits on the board of the PCCD still, am I correct?
Yes.
Yes, you're aware. Okay, I've met with her several times. Representative Tom Mahaffey. And also, I spoke with the staff, with Representative Pennychuck out of, I believe it's Lehigh.
Or Montgomery, I
Or
think.
Montgomery County. Okay. Now, she has a current bill with a printer's number that is already, I believe, in committee. Does not address our particular dilemma in as far as our CETA funding, but I had spoken with her staff. Now, she is probably going to be a senator after this election. So, but the staff is brought up to speed on exactly what it is that we need. And during the summer, I spoke with them, and they said, "Well, you're not going to get a whole lot through now. It's the end of the legislative year, but we should try very, very hard at the very beginning of the year, because that'll be the beginning of a new legislative calendar." So I suggest that maybe we start again by drafting a letter.
Well, we're one step ahead of you. Actually, we have drafted a letter, and it was approved by Mike Pennington, the executive director. He reviewed it. We just have to get that put on, board letterhead and sent. And it addresses the surcharge, that the surcharge has not been increased since '94.
Mhm.
And that the board has done what they can to conserve costs. But something needs to.
Because it's got to go to leadership, according to everything that I'm learning, you know what I mean, with the rank and file members. It's like, hey, we want to help you, but you're, and they asked, of course, if we had which was funny, is, the best thing for you guys to do is hire a lobbyist. And it's like, we don't have, constables, different associations, of course, would need to, they don't have law, because believe it or not, that's the way things get done in the General Assembly. All right. Through lobbying, that type of thing. But, you got to sell the leadership according to the rank and file. But I think it's a start. So we have something there to hang our hat on.
Right. So bringing it back to the point, John, do we get staff moving on coming up with recommendations, or do we take the chance of letting the program financially crash and hope for a bailout?
No, I don't think we do that too. I think it's too risky, letting it crash and burn. There's probably some members of the General Assembly that would want to see that happen, and we've worked too hard to risk that type of thing. So I do think that staff, should weigh the options and think and come up with something creative. I would like to see that letter go out sooner than later. So like I said, we have something, there we can point to, coming at the new legislative session in January.
Okay. Possible Price, what's your
Can I say
thoughts?
something?
Well, we have Possible Price. We have him yet to speak.
I think we ought to really consider the fact that this could tank up, okay? And we should consider the fact that in the near future, we're gonna have to decide if we're gonna move forward and charge everybody for the training so that it doesn't go, belly up. So that's something we ought to think about, seriously think about, and also come up with the number, the physical dollar and cent number that it would take to do this training per member.
Right.
Okay?
And realistically, that's what we need, good financial numbers as to what actually, if we had to go that route, what do we actually need to charge in order to financially keep the program solvent year in, year out? And I think that's what's going to take some time. That's why I brought the subject up today, because I know we're going to need a fair amount of lead time in order to put this thing together. And, and here we are at the bare minimum of hours. And the General Assembly saying 80 hours. Okay, so for 80 hours of training, this is what we're faced with. We can't even increase training. Even if we had a mandate to increase hours, to provide training on other subjects, we just can't do that. We don't have it. The financially is not here. All right, so I'll open it up to the public. The public, I just want to mention, please state your name and your constable, your cert number, and your county. And before I open it up to the public for this, I do need a motion for this unapproved financial report. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I was gonna ask if Dorothy can present the report. She didn't actually, run through the report.
Okay, let's back up. Dorothy, will you go ahead and present the financial report for us, please?
Okay, so have we approved last quarter's report? Is that an action item on the?
Yeah, the previous fiscal report dated June 30th was approved at the August 11th meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so while we're talking about accuracy, in preparation, I discovered a computation error on the first page of the fiscal report. So let me go through those. Your fiscal report for first quarter of the state fiscal year 2022-23 can be found on pages 13 through 16 of your packet. Beginning with the statement of cash and receipts on page 13. Balance carried forward from the previous fiscal year is $3,086,320.04. And the fees collected through the end of the first quarter were $349,090.44. The total cumulative expenditures are $362,260.52. And the total cumulative expenditures and commitments is $3,694,613.15. Now that's where the error is on your report if you're almost there. So which also includes $324,176.78 of administrators' expenditures and commitments, with a total uncommitted funds of negative $259,203.10. So it was a computation error because we had a new PO right at the end of the quarter, and there was a formula error. My apologies. So that 3199175 should be 3694613 with a negative uncommitted balance of $259,203.10. I have provided Sherry and Nick with a corrected version of that particular page. The other pages are correct of the PO balances, the projections. There was just that one line in the formula that did not compute with the new PO.
Dorothy, could you go through the total expenditures and commitments? It was $3,600,000.
So the total cumulative the total for
expenditures
and commitments is $3,694,613.58.
And then the actual uncommitted balance as of 9/30/2022 is negative 259,000.
203.10.
Okay, thank you for that.
So does anybody have any questions about that specifically? All the other information on the other pages of the report reflect the correct total. It's just we had a formula error on one of the lines when we added the new PO that came in at the end of the quarter.
Okay, anything else, Dorothy?
No, that's it. Any other additional questions?
One of the things I asked for quite some time ago was, do we get a break on our building rental since we have very few people here? I never got an answer to that question.
I have not received an answer either.
Because I see our building rental is $14,908.74. And so far this year, well, do I understand it's right? $4,259.64? Correct.
That's correct.
I was hoping our landlord would give us a break since we have very few people here due to the pandemic restrictions. Do I have a motion to approve the amended financial report?
I'll make the motion. John Bruno.
John Bruno. Do I have a second?
Joanne Reed.
Thanks, I'll make it second.
Let Price, have a second. Okay, now I'll open it up to the public for any comments they have about the financial report before we take a vote. So members of the public that want to respond to this, please give us your name, your constable, your certification number, and what county you represent.
Craig, I have a question. Is this about what you discussed previously or just about this financial document?
So basically, the financial document and the discuss. I mean, we have a discussion, and the discussion is about recommendations. Who's speaking?
This is Constable Dave Kneller from Lebanon County, cert number B003636. And I want to point out an issue that I was able to identify. I was part of the constable training work group a couple of years ago, and we were able to identify one of the major shortfalls in the CETA fee is coming because of illegal conduct of the magisterial district judges. What they're doing across the state will, let's say a defendant hypothetically has 10 warrants out for their arrest, and they'll print one warrant for the constable. They'll keep the other 9, or sometimes they even issue multiple warrants to the constable, but will only pay them for one. So the constable on the one warrant that he has issued to them brings the defendant to the district court, and then at the time of the hearing, the court then presents the other 9 dockets, not only cheating the constable out of $247.50 of constable fees, but cheats the constable training fund out of $45 off of the arrest for the 9 dockets. And this is happening almost in many of the counties across the state, and it's been happening for years. And Sherry Leffler and John Fow were supposed to, we were told and promised to the constables that attended this work group, were supposed to send a letter to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court and to AOPC identifying this deficiency so it can be corrected. And this has been years, and I haven't seen this letter, and I don't think it's ever gone out. And they promised us that it would, but it hasn't. So, before we start asking for fundings from other things, we need to clean up the deficiencies and improper handling by the district courts. And that's where a lot of this money, I mean, obviously COVID and, all that has to be taken into consideration, but there's probably almost as many warrants not being paid as being paid.
Well, I understand your point, Constable Keller, because this is the same thing I've struggled with up in our counties, for 27 years as constable. I see those inequities court by court by court. But right now, the opinion of these judges are that they run their own courts, and the action you're talking about as far as the Supreme Court weighing in on it, those questions have been asked, and I've actually had the opportunity to ask people way up the chain of command in the court system, what's it going to take to force that? And to be honest with you, I have not gotten any good answers. There's been no good answers that anybody in the system is willing to, as you say, drop the hammer and say, this is what you need to do. I understand the perfect world, that's what we need in order to straighten our financial shortfalls. And I mean, these are things that we can continue in our letters to the General Assembly and the lobbying I've done with senators and with representatives, which has been quite extensive since I came back on the board back in 2018. So I understand your point, but that's the reality we're facing right now is, you know, is there anybody within that system that can force that? And barring legislation, I don't know that that can happen. Mr. Fowler, weigh in.
Well, I'd like to address, first of all, Mr. Neller, I've never promised to send a letter to the Chief Justice. First of all, that's way beyond my pay grade to do. That is not in my power. If anything came from this agency, it would have to come from the leadership of this agency. We have talked with AOPC. In fact, this board had AOPC here at several meetings back in roughly 2013, 14 to discuss, because the chair at the time, Judge Obiella, wanted to make it a mandatory field so that when they would issue work to the constable, that $5 surcharge had to be filled in. And I'm summarizing, but in the discussions with AOPC during the board meetings is that they were not inclined to make that a mandatory fee. That if an MDJ reduces that $5 surcharge to $1 to zero, that's up to the MDJ. So we have had discussions with AOPC about that, but I would never promise to send a letter to the Chief Justice. That is beyond my pay grade. I know better. So.
Well, I don't know if you were the one that was going to sign off on it, but there were many people who were there that can vouch that that PCCD was going to send a letter regarding those concerns to the Chief Justice and AOPC, AOPC. Yeah.
I'm not going to stand here and debate it. I've made it clear. I would never make a promise. In fact, the discussion about sending a letter to the leadership, the board brought that up initially back in 2018. We even reviewed a draft letter at the time, but it did not go out. So we are now at the point where our executive director has approved a letter to send to the legislature to discuss the surcharge increase. So
Ms. Leffler, you want to weigh in on this?
I agree with John. I mean, I don't remember any conversation about sending anything to the Chief Justice. I do recall having a letter drafted at that time sent to the General Assembly about the surcharge increase. And we have had many conversations with AOPC. At the time when Judge Obiella was on the board, when AOPC came in, which John referenced, they actually agreed to put a 5 in the box so that it could still be deleted out, but it was populated with that $5 surcharge. So they have to go into multiple screens to assess the surcharge. And my understanding is, and also being at the Clerk of Courts Association conferences, the staff within the offices, there's such turnover in those offices that knowledge, that level of knowledge is not being transmitted down to the newly hired people in the offices. And honestly, until it's made mandatory and there's some teeth to it, what can we do? I mean, we have nothing, we have no teeth or no hammer per se to make it mandatory.
Correct. Okay, well, I appreciate your thoughtful comment. We're gonna move on. Is there anybody else from the public? And then, like I said, there'll be a public voice at the end here. So if you have anything else you want to talk about, we can bring it up at that point. So do I have anybody else from the public that wants to comment about the unapproved financial report of the November 3rd meeting?
It's Constable Daniel Hollenbaugh from Adams County. Cert number is B003798.
Yes, sir.
I was also attendance to the work group meetings, and the one thing that I do know that we discussed that I don't know if the board's considered was having the staff at the PCCD go in and access what constables are currently serving, whatever number or excessive number of warrants that are required to, say, cover their mandatory training. As the board knows, and I know, there are quite a few constables in the Commonwealth that utilize the training provided by the Constable Education and Training Board, but don't do any court work whatsoever. And so while I would pay for my training if it was necessary to continue to keep the fund fluid, I think that cost should be shared amongst the constables that are utilizing this training but are not contributing to the training fund at all. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, we did get that data about a month ago. I think, as I mentioned to you, it's a very sizable file. In fact, AOPC had to put it out into a secure website for us to pull it down. They couldn't send it via email. So there are two analysts here at PCCD who do a lot of data analysis stuff of criminal justice data. Mr. Orth, they are going through that data now, and they will put together a report because the information we got, they will be able to break it down by MDJ court, county. So they're going to give us a pretty extensive report on, where the most constables are working, how much they're, how many dockets they're doing a year, what parts of the state, that kind of stuff. So they will have that for the first meeting in 2023. So
The information that we received, does that give us like warrants, civil process?
it gives us everything. So it gives us the actual docket number. And of course, from there, we can pull off what type of docket is. Is it traffic, non-traffic? Is it, civil, et cetera? We have the individual constable because we wanted to see, when we did this before, we looked in to see who were the guys moving the most dockets versus, there were guys in there who had maybe 1 or 2 dockets a year. So we have all of that information in there. Like I said, and we got it for 2018 through 21. So it's a large set of data. So
this will also be able to tell us the district courts that are actually the amount of surcharge they're pumping into the system. Will we be able to tell that?
right, but then the issue too goes back to then the collections that we did. So we asked for the individual constable because we wanted to validate their cert number, et cetera. The docket, the actual docket number tells us a lot of information. Of course, the court and everything else. Was the surcharge assessed? And was, if they had a completion date, I believe, of the service. So that'll tell us too is, is Constable Westover sitting on 3 dockets that haven't been served yet or, returned to the court or whatever. Because that's important too, because it might have been assessed, but if it hasn't been served yet or it hasn't been, closed out, so to speak, we don't know if we're going to get that $5.
Well, I think that's really going to help us, especially when we talk about collections, who's contributing into the fund and who's not. And I'm not just talking constables, but I'm talking about courts. I guess now we'll be able to, at least now be able to figure out, okay, what counties, what courts are actually, contributing and which ones are guilty of what we're talking about, not assessing a surcharge or not collecting a surcharge or whatever. Right. So that's kind of, the thrust that I've been, on since 2018 was to try to get that information. I know AOPC was a lot of pushback to get that accomplished.
Well, it was also submitting the correct requests and wording it properly so we get the data we want. The first time I submitted it, the data we got back did not have all the elements we needed. So I had to. AOPC was very cooperative. Their data guys were very cooperative. I had several calls with them and we talked through. I said, look, this is what I'm trying to capture. And so they talked me through how to submit that request because then based on that request, they have to run that data. The last time we did this, it was approximately, I think, 2015 or 16. And we had 5 years worth of data. And of course, that showed that in the year something's issued and that surcharge is assessed, we typically get 50%, 40 to 50% in that first year. It could take up to another 4 years to actually get that $5 when it's assessed. It slowly trickled down. And then there was about 10% at that time that it was assessed, but we never got for whatever reason.
Well, and I'd just like to add on to that for John as well, as far as the collections then, they collect at the county level. So we would have to go to each individual county controller's office and have them go back and figure out where we were missing those collections from the individual MDJ offices. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's a complicated process. I mean,
Yeah.
you just by the sheer number of dockets we're talking about.
And like with that, we just wouldn't have the staff power to do that, to find out where, who is being deficient as far as the collections. As far as the assessment.
Right, this will show up for it wasn't assessed for
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
If I can also jump into, I guess for those who are really going to be looking at this, the end result with the data, I want to make sure there's not like a witch hunt going on after courts, because there is a difference between the assessment and the collections. And keep in mind right now with the state of the economy, you know, collections have been affected because a lot of the folks that have, you know, that are on payment plans, you know, you will see an increase in the amount of individuals being declared indigent. So that is going to affect the collection. So again, I just want to make sure that, you know, from my role as a court administrator, please make sure, like, if you see a court that is not doing the collections, it might not necessarily be because they're not collecting it. It could be because action was taken to declare a defendant indigent and those fees.
Right, at that point, we don't get that.
Correct. And so that I don't think you're going to be able to track. I mean, at this.
No.
So,
Well, the one thing, Trish, we did see before when we got this data
Yeah.
was that time lag between the assessment. You know, by the time we got to 2 to 3 years out, we were at 70% or more of collections.
right.
So the issue is, we know there's always going to be that delay. You know, just because we say, you know, X amount of dollars was assessed this year, doesn't mean that's going to be in our pocket or in the fund this year or even next year.
Yeah.
So that's why even if we get a surcharge increase, we're seeing that with the deputy sheriffs. That went up incrementally over the last 3 years. But, you know, there are still the old surcharges out there that haven't been collected yet. You know, so the original was like $10, you know, so that's still floating in. And so it's going to take several years before the impact of a full surcharge increase or whatever.
So, and that's why I brought the discussion up today, because knowing the time lag here, even with the pipeline, even if we miraculously got a surcharge increase by the General Assembly tomorrow, we're looking 18 months at best.
Before we see that impact a significant
money coming in. And that's why I wanted to start the planning process, or at least the thought process today, because I recognize, you know, to collect $5 for it to take 3 to 4 to 5 years to collect one fine or a surcharge, that's the complexity of the issue. I mean, you know, because there's no magic bullet other than the fact that they say, okay, we'll make it mandatory that $5 is collected and delivered right away. But we don't have it. We don't have that in a mandatory field from AOPC, so that's where we're at.
Well, we saw an impact with AOPC, I want to say in the mid, like 2014, 15, when they rolled out, people could pay minor offenses online with a credit card. So then there's even less work that might go to the DJ to be issued to a constable. So, you know, that had a ripple effect on how much surcharge were being assessed, because then that reduced certain amount of work at a DJ's office.
Yeah, the ability to pay online has also kept the number of warrants that are actually being issued, because people can go online and they can get that taken care of. So they don't have to drive out to the office anymore for executives.
And that's why, again, you know, I think maybe if there's a way that we could look for another funding stream at this point, because I think because of that technology, because of the issues that we've been having, the C to fee, and if that's the only way that we're funding this program, it's not sustainable. So we're going to have to look elsewhere if it's possible.
Yeah. All right. So for the unapproved financial report from November 3rd, do I have any other public comment about that? I'll go to a vote then. So we have a motion and we have a second. Major Reed, you're
Aye.
aye. Trish?
Aye.
Bruno? John Bruno, aye.
White's aye.
And Westover, aye. Okay, so we will approve that amended financial report that was presented to us by Dorothy. So we'll move on to the next action item, which is the board meeting schedule. I believe that would be Nick. Is that correct?
Thank you. The board meeting schedule for the 2023 year can be found on page 17 of the board packet. It lists the Thursday dates of all 4 meetings, and there will be a combination, as of right now, of Teams and in-person to meet the requirements of the Sunshine Act. Does the board have any questions?
Okay, so go ahead and read off the dates that we have scheduled.
Sure.
Nick.
Thursday, February 9th, 2023. Thursday, May 11th, 2023. Thursday, August 10th, 2023. Thursday, November 2nd, 2023, and they all start at 9 a.m.
Okay, very good, very good. Do I have a motion to approve the schedule?
I'll make that motion.
Make that motion to approve the 2023 meeting schedule. Trish,
Mhm.
do I have a second?
Joanne Reed, I second it.
Okay. Did you read a second? Do I have any questions or comments by board members? Any public discussion of the meeting schedule? Hearing none, voice vote then.
Actually, I have something.
Okay, who
So
says?
this is Terry White, York County, certification number is B004328. I understand that there's Teams meeting information on here, but I believe they don't send that out to everyone and just send the call in. I would request that they send the Teams meeting link out to everyone so we can actually attend and participate in person via audio.
Just to address that, Constable White, you would still need to request that information, because we couldn't send out the link. We can't invite 800 constables. So if someone we send out the information, and if you want to have that link sent to you, we could do that on an individual basis. Is that acceptable, John?
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we had a motion, we had a second, and we're getting ready for Major Read.
Aye.
Trish?
Aye.
John Bruno, aye.
Right side.
West Ever, aye. All right, so that's approved, and we're set for next year on that. And do we expect this team thing to continue for quite some time?
Yeah, I think, just, it's going to continue. And actually, prior to the pandemic, there was attempts, we tried to use, the state had WebEx, which was a similar software. We had made attempts to essentially broadcast the board meetings at that point, but we never got it really functional. And then the state did away with WebEx for our agency. So,
Okay, very good. Good. Everyone, please make sure your mics are muted if you're not speaking. I'm going to move on to the next action item, which is going to be instructor certifications, and I'm going to refer to Tracy Beaver for that.
Thanks, Chair Westover. The instructor certifications can be found on pages 18 to 24 of the board packet. These instructors are for the Penn State University Jazzy train delivery contract. The first instructor is Timothy Abate. We are requesting approval for the topics of general, communications, and firearms. The second is Michael Crow. Again, staff are recommending board certifications for the general, physical skills, and firearms topics. The third is Thomas Haran. Staff are recommending board certifications for general as well as communications. The next instructor is Eric Lawson. And staff are recommending board certification for general, communications, physical skills, and firearms for Eric Lawson.
I just want to point out, that's a Temple University.
That is Temple. I apologize. Yes.
Okay.
And the next Penn State is Stephen Marshall. Staff are recommending board certification for general, communications without crisis. Crisis was added in error, and we're requesting communication topic without the crisis intervention subtopic. And then also firearms as well. And then another Penn State instructor is Daniel McMurtry. Staff recommend board certification for the topics of general as well as firearms. And the last instructor is also for Penn State, James Vogel. And staff recommend board certification for general, communications with the subtopic of MOAB as well as firearms.
And I'd just like to point out, I believe James Vogel and Tom Haran were previously board certified instructors with Penn State PF.
yeah, they taught for quite a while.
Yeah, they've been out for a while, so we have them complete another application and then come back in because they were decertified when Penn State PF lost the terminated the contract.
Do I have a motion to approve the instructors that have been put forth for for our consideration.
One question, Chair Westover, the first one, Timothy Abadi, security manager, is the organization that he works for, it's Calypso Enterprises LLC. Is that correct?
Correct. And actually, I know him from Mercyhurst clear back in the day. And I believe he was he not a Mercyhurst guy at some point?
Yes, 120 Mercyhurst University.
I know him from way back. I think he was a trooper.
Yes, he was previously.
Yeah. Okay.
He's a retired trooper.
Okay.
And I believe it's Abate. I think
Is
that's
it?
pronounced
Is it
up north.
Up north, what, Italian, it's Abadi.
Abadi.
It's Abadi, yeah.
For us hillbillies in the Northwest.
Yeah. Anyhow,
Penn State staff can confirm his.
yeah, his pronunciation, exactly. Thank you, Chair Westover.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm asking for a motion to approve these instructors put forth. Do I have a motion?
Joanne Reed, I make that motion.
John Bruno, I'll second that motion.
Okay. And discussion, Tony Muha, you're online. What I want to know is, you've been shorthanded all year. Is this going to fix your problem? Tony, you still with me?
Yes, were you able to hear me, Craig?
Now I
There you
can.
go, yes.
Okay.
Okay. I said this is taking us in the right direction with the instructors. So yes, we'll have a few more for February as well.
Okay. And I have Tony Longo from Temple. What's your situation?
Similar, we're working towards recruiting an additional cadre of instructors to supplement our current instructors.
I know from personal experience, one of the things, we did lose a bunch of folks during the pandemic.
Yes.
A lot of what I like to call the old guard instructors that I worked for years ago are gone. They're
Right, a lot of the instructors who've been with us kind of since the beginning of the program. I don't know, during COVID, we lost them because we canceled a lot of training. I don't know if they've retired, moved on, whatever. But I know both schools, we actually drafted an email, and MOPEC was kind enough to send it out to all their instructors saying that this program was looking for, the type of instructors. And I know that's some of the response the schools have gotten. So,
And they've been able to follow up with the individuals then.
I know this year has been an absolute struggle. Absolutely. I know you guys have had a struggle getting enough folks to teach. So,
John, Sherry, do we have a current up-to-date comprehensive list of all our instructors
Yes, that's kept in the system.
that is in that we have access to?
Well, staff have access to it.
Okay.
Constables do not have access to it.
What about the board?
That would be something that would have to be decided.
Yeah.
I can provide a list of all the instructors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely do something like that, and provide that to the board.
Okay.
But as far as access in the computer system,
Yeah. All
that
right.
would probably be a no-go, but I can definitely do that.
Okay. Thank
do I have any public comment on the instructors that have been put forward? Okay, hearing none then, we had a motion from Major Reed. We had a second from
John Bruno.
John Bruno. Roll call vote. Major Reed.
Aye.
Norwood voted aye.
Bruno, aye.
Pikes eye.
Westover, aye. Okay, so these instructors have been approved and we'll get them on board. Very good. All right, so that concludes our action items. So I want to go into the discussion items. The first thing I'm looking at is the supervisor's report from Sherry Leffler.
Thank you, Chair. These statistics are updated as of yesterday. Tracy was able to get through the submission of the online grades pretty quickly, even though we had a large amount this week. So thank you, Tracy, for working hard on that. So I'll just go through the 2022 trainings. We had scheduled originally for continuing education classes, 39 classes. We had 32 that were completed, and we canceled 7 of those classes. We had 762 successfully complete the in-person training. As far as the online, everything must be completed by Friday, November 18th at 5 p.m. We have been sending out, Tracy has been sending out reminders to everyone. You have a month left, you have 2 weeks left, you have a week left. So as of today, you have 15 days left to finish your 4-hour online subjects. Right now, we are at, for crisis intervention, we've had 608 out of 813 complete. That is 75%. And we have some failures there too. We've had 15 first-time failures and 1 second attempt failure. Legal updates, 552 have completed, 68%. We've had 21 first-time failures and 3 second attempt failures for legal updates. Service of criminal warrants, we've had 566 complete, 68% of the population, and we've had 2 first-time attempt failures. Out of the 813 enrollments, we've had 449 who have completed all of the 2022 Con Ed requirements. 5-hour annual firearms qualifications, we've had 40 scheduled, 32 were completed, 8 were canceled. We had 602 constables enrolled into firearms classes. Of those, 461 have successfully completed. We had 38 failures with a failure rate of 6.3% for the failure rates then. We have completed now 4 basic training classes this year. We have sent out the 2023 basic training schedule to approximately about 226 individual constables who were not able to get into classes in 2022. We are actively receiving those enrollments for the 2023 basic training classes, which includes the class payments for the classes for next year. We have 6 basic trainings scheduled for next year, and I believe 7 basic firearms scheduled for next year as well. Basic firearms courses, we've had 4 scheduled, 3 have been completed. We had one that just started in Lancaster County on the 28th of October. That will be finishing up this Sunday, November 5th. 2023, I just went into the classes. So far, we have 12 enrolled for the first basic training that will start in January 13th of 2023, 16 for the one following that, and then 3, 2, 2, and 1 for the subsequent classes that are scheduled for next year. Program staff have processed over 300 class payments this year for both the basic training, basic firearms, no-shows, and failures. And then just another quick statistic, active and certified constables currently is 847. In November of 2021. We had 912, which is a difference of 65 certified constables. Firearm certifications, we have 622, about 74%. And last year in 2021, we had 728 firearm certified constables. So there we're down 106 constables compared to last year. Since the initiation of the program in 1996, we have issued 4,758 certifications, either through the 80-hour basic firearms training or a waiver examination. Any questions on the supervisory report?
Now this is the number that has me up at night. You know, when it came to the revenue projections coming down the line, at 461 that completed so far this year. That's my problem. You know, we only have 461 as of now, and we have, 15 more days
Correct.
to pick those numbers up. So that's why, I was drilling down a little bit with you guys about, the projections, how tight are those projections? Because I'm looking basically right now at 50% less constables going into the new year that actually can go out and serve paper and create surcharge versus what we have right now.
And that's why I said it'll take us probably into next year to see how many of these new constables are working for the courts, and does that number go back up? Traditionally for a long time, it was always about 1,000 average per year of certified constables. But as these numbers have dropped since COVID, I don't think it'll get back up to 1,000.
John, since online training, have you guys, like last year, seen a surge at the very, very end?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I know Tracy, I talked with her the other day, she would process maybe, 20 grades, 30 grades in a week. And then in the last 2 weeks, each week was 150, 160.
Really?
Guys were waiting to the last minute. I know Temple's help desk has commented about the massive increase because guys have waited. Now they got to change their password. And they're waiting for the last minute to. And what I will say to you, Deputy Sheriff program they have basically kind of little better statistics, but it's the same issue. You know, that they're mailing out, they're emailing sheriff's office and going, here's a roster of your deputies who haven't done their online training, and it closes the exact same day as the constable training. So.
Yeah, and they have a little better control over that.
Right, but the other problem too is, you know, we don't find out till the training year ends. We'll look at deputies who didn't complete their training. Well, then the sheriff didn't tell us, well, that guy retired 2 months ago, or we terminated it, or, you know. So we end up cleaning up the rosters at the end of the year.
Right.
But, you know, it's the same thing. There's always this spike in both programs in the last probably month.
How many have you seen last year, Chase, where they have completed 1 or 2, but forgot 3?
Yes.
A very, very large number, and unfortunately, constables did not realize that. So then this year they were scrambling to get into Con Ed class in the beginning of the year and also complete the online training. So we had a large number complete online training in the beginning of the year to get their
recertified.
to get recertified.
Right.
And as John said, over the summer months, I might have had 20 grades a week, 50 at the most, and the past 2-3 weeks they've been up over 100, 150.
So they would do like one total training module and then get that letter that said, or that feedback that said, congratulations, you passed, thinking that they were done, or?
Yes.
Oh, we've advertised that you must take 3. It's in the training schedule, it's in the bulletins.
Yeah, it's.
We publicized it numerous
It's there.
times in the training schedule, and then this year what we did on each one of the tiles, we said crisis intervention, 1 of 3.
Right.
Legal updates, 2 of 3. Service of criminal warrants, 3 of 3, so that they knew that there was 3 subjects that needed to be completed. I mean, honestly, there are some days I don't know how much more simpler we can make our instructions.
You can't. It's a matter of reading it.
I just have a quick question for Sherry, unless it's in here, I'll say it. I know you said that you've got about 226 new constables that you've sent notices out to.
Correct.
How many seats are actually available in the basic training courses for 2022?
Right now, of the 6 that we have scheduled, we have 245 seats available. And then we also have a backup.
Okay.
If needed.
Thank you.
So as of right now, there's plenty of seats available.
Yes.
And that happens every year. You see, we cancel firearms, we cancel Con Eds. We always plan, because we know guys will fail or, you know, rearrange their schedule. We typically have a certain percentage of more seats available than guys we think have to complete training. You know, so the seats are available. It's just a matter of them.
And that's where we look at our projections. We look at the number of certified from the previous year.
Right.
So like when I'm looking at 700 and 912 completed Con Ed in 2021 and 728, those are the numbers that I'm going to use to project for the next year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and then if our numbers are 20% lower than they were the previous year, I'm going to be canceling 20% of the classes.
Okay, thank you.
So do we see a lot of crossover people that live, say, in Temple's territory come to Penn State folks come to Temple? Do we see a lot of that?
Yeah, I don't know.
Not a lot. With the basic trainings, yes. Because, you know, we started in the West and then everybody from the East was going to the West. And then we have a class in the East. So we have people going from the West to the East. So for basic trainings, yes, there's a lot of crossover. But as far as the Con Eds and annual firearms, not so much.
Okay. So for basic, they're willing to travel.
Yes.
They want to get into a class, there's a seat available, they're willing.
They have been willing to travel, correct.
Okay.
But now, as far as planning for next year, we have Southwest, Northwest, Southeast, Northeast, Central. So we're trying to accommodate those other individuals in the northern tier as well, so that they don't have to travel as far. And we're planning them enough, with enough time between.
But it also comes down to now that they have to pay, are they getting their paperwork and their money in time?
Yeah.
They may want to go to the January class, but if we don't get their documentation and their check.
And right now, I have 12 enrolled in the first class.
Right.
So typically, how much lead time do they need?
Well, for staff, we need at least a month to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
So that we can process the payment, get them enrolled in the class. And that's why we felt it was more beneficial to start in the fall this year to get those classes full as quickly as possible, so that if we do have to scramble and add on another 2 or, that type of thing, we will have the time and, capabilities to do that.
And moving forward, we actually have now started, we're exploring online payment. So I reached out to Dan Onifer, who's like an IT manager, projects manager here, because the state, there's other state agencies that use online payment vendors, and that's what we would do is, so we had to look at, and he provided me some initial documentation, and we're going to be meeting here as the kind of year winds down to try and go forward so that in the future, hopefully, we can have somebody sign up for a basic training and pay for it
With a credit card,
with a
right?
credit card or whatever right online, and then they're enrolled and they get the come from the way it used to be when they didn't have to pay. Somebody could sign up. But again, we have to, see, what vendors we can use and is there a cost and all that kind of stuff. So we have to do all that exploratory work before we can implement that.
Yeah, the other thing that always bothers me is we know that something's out of our control. Is a certificate of election
Right.
being issued to constables early enough? That's why I was asking about the lead time. Because if you're a newly elected constable and your class starts in January and you guys need a month lead time and they're not getting their election certificate till sometime in January, they're not going to be able to make that class, under the current setup.
Well, in 2022, we did take that into consideration because we knew that we would not have the election certificates in a timely manner to have a class in January.
Right.
You know what I mean? So we did delay the classes starting this year in 2022 because of the election certificate.
But next year, the class, we know there were guys who, they have all their paperwork in, but, they didn't get it in time to get into a class. So they're kind of the ones who are going to hit the earlier class.
Earlier classes.
If you get elected now, you're not going to make the January class, if you get elected this month. But guys who have already, they're in office, they were just waiting on a basic,
And they have to register with us. We have to have their information in our system in order for us to be able to contact them. We are not keeping a list of elected constables outside of the SETS system.
They have to register in sets. That's the first step.
It's amazing, all the outside forces that have control over us, things that we can't fix.
Yeah.
That we're dealing with trying to run a training program. Okay. So any further questions for Sherry, my board members of her, that report?
Chairman
Well,
Westover, I have one.
So we don't have a public forum for her report, but under public voice, I'll recognize you and then you can bring up that point, okay?
No, Chairman Westover, can you hear me?
Yes, I just wanted to tell you that under her report, at this point, we don't have public forum for that discussion item. However, under public voice, you're welcome to bring it up at that time, okay?
Okay, yeah, I just had a quick question. Thank you. I'll do that.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so anybody else on the board? Okay, then I'm gonna have Sherry move on to the board regulations revision discussion.
Okay, the board regulation revisions, the draft packet that was presented with the board packet I have accepted all of the previous changes that those housekeeping changes where we change training year to calendar year, using the same terminology throughout the regulation. All of that has been accepted in the document. And the only thing that is in that document now is the elimination of the waiver application. So anything that had referenced the waiver application, I removed and showed the track changes there in that document as well. If the board has no other changes or any discussion on the board regulations, what I would like to do is to have this finalized as a final draft to bring to the board at the February meeting so that we can get this started through the review process, the internal review process with PCCD before it goes to the Independent Regulatory Review Commission.
So we have a couple steps yet.
We have a lot of steps left.
Yeah, we're at the very beginning.
Yeah, we're still at the beginning.
If it goes well and there's no bumps along the way, it could take 1.5 to 2 years before IRRC, it gets completely approved and
gets published.
And gets published as regulation.
So ERP's gotten better. It's only 1.5 years.
Correct.
Yes, they have gotten better.
So board members, any discussion? Anything that you didn't particularly like, or are we good?
Good.
Good.
Okay, well, I thank y'all for reading that and bearing with me through all of these changes. And thank you for that.
All right, then I guess we'll move on to the informational items. And I'm looking at the 2023 Constable Curriculum Overview. And I want to recognize Megan Staub, for her report.
Thank you, Chair Westover. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
For a full course description, please refer to pages 26 and 27 in the packet. You can read these at your own leisure. I am going to provide a general overview of the 2023 continuing ed course descriptions. We're going to start with prisoner transports, which is 8 hours in the classroom. The content of this subject will cover best practices in applying handcuffs, leg irons, and transports belts. There will be heavy emphasis on teaching constables to anticipate problems and properly react to prisoner escape during transport. De-escalation is 4 hours online. This subject matter will focus on teaching the ability to recognize when someone's in crisis or when a situation is going to escalate to a crisis state. Constables will be instructed on emotional intelligence, decision-making skills, and verbal engagement as a way of providing calm to a circumstance to keep the situation from escalating to violence. Legal updates is 4 hours online. Legal updates will provide further explanation and clarity on residency as it pertains to constables. This subject will also review the legal authority extended to constables while contrasting this with the consequences of constables who misrepresent their authority to the public. In addition, new civil process laws and best practices for performing service for landlord and tenant issues will be reviewed. Disease of addiction is 4 hours online. This subject will provide an explanation of the relationship between trauma and addiction, and this content is going to provide heavy emphasis on the opioid crisis in the state of Pennsylvania. And finally, the annual firearms qualification course is a 5-hour course that will accommodate the second weapons qualifications. A written test will be administered at the opening of the course, and constables will have prior access to the student firearms study guide in sets for prior preparation. And that's everything. Thank you.
And I want to point out the module disease of addiction. That is a module that the Department of Health has already had in place. It's an online and they've taught it in person to first responders over the last 2 years within the state. So we were able to reuse an existing module. And also we've had Temple do, they didn't have to really do much. It's just provide a little bit of a lead in to say, why is it relevant to constable? You're out serving papers, you're going to encounter this in your performance of your duties. But so Department of Health was generous enough to, give us this free of charge, no problem. It's a pretty good course. So
Let me ask you this, on the annual firearms qualification course. The qualification course hasn't changed at all, correct?
right, since 2005, and at the last meeting, I know the board, so I will be putting together a work group to review the basic firearms. And of course, one of the things will be the course of fire, to look at that and are there any recommendations that need to be updated, et cetera. So yeah, the course of fire has essentially been the same since 2005.
And the written test and the training guide that goes with that written test, when's the last time that was changed?
That was updated in 2019.
2019. So basically 3 years, the same test, the same.
Right, I mean, there's multiple versions, but yes, yeah.
So why are we still having folks failing the written part of the firearms test?
I think because they don't look at the study.
Study guide. Okay. So I would encourage everybody to get online, get the study guide. If you need to print it off, it's printable. Study it before you come to firearms class so that you have the opportunity to shoot your firearm, because if you don't pass the written test, you can't go out on the range and shoot.
Do we remind them, when we send out their letter that they, have been approved for the, qualifications or their requal to please access to study guide through sets?
But I don't know if that's in the confirmation letter or not. We can look.
I'm not sure that it is.
I know when you mentioned it in training bulletins, see,
Right.
training
It's definitely in the
schedule,
training
we say,
bulletin, yeah.
this is where you find the study guide. The study guide's only 14 pages.
You know what we're dealing with, right? It's, you only got to remind them again. So as many opportunities, I think we have to remind them of that particular tool that's in sets. We should probably do that.
And that's an easy thing.
And it's a 10-question test, so you can only use 3 to maintain a 70, or 2, and your firearms can have at least a 75.
Mhm.
So here you are, But the 10 questions basically is, a lot of them are based on common sense. I mean, they're,
Things you should already know.
yeah, I mean, really, I mean, it's something we've drilled for years and years and years. And not only our program, but the NRA and a whole bunch of other folks on.
Yeah,
Just re-reminding them again, if we have that opportunity with that official letter that we send out, okay?
Yeah, that's something we could add in there.
All right.
And I'm not sure, but I want to say we had at least 3 or 4 written test failures. Just so they never made it even to qualification.
Yeah. I got a firearms, I want to at least have the opportunity to shoot my firearm. You know, I want to fail the written test and I'll be able to go out in the range and actually, that's the fun part of firearms, I think, is going out there and actually shooting. So, okay, any further questions of the board of Megan Staub on what she presented? Okay, then we're going to go to the second informational item. I believe that Diane Morgan's online, and this is to talk about Commonwealth versus Legree, which is a subject that we cover in the basic training. And I guess earlier this year, we were challenged on the validity of Legree. So Mr. Fowle directed, we talked with him about getting that information to find out whether Legree is still good law or not. So Diane Morgan's online. I'd like to get your information.
Mr. Chairman, this is Deborah Sandiford, Chief Counsel.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, good morning. And I
Good morning.
want to apologize to you because I think there's been some misunderstanding. And for my responsibility in that misunderstanding, my humblest apologies to you and to the staff. You know, as you know better than I do, that this case is one where the Pennsylvania Supreme Court discussed whether or not it was legally permissible for an individual to hold elective office as a constable and hold elective office as a city council member. At first blush, even though I understand that it is taught in the curriculum, I do not see on the face of it how this has a direct impact on the board's role to provide training to constables for their work in the judiciary. If the board disagrees with that, we would be prepared to have some sort of private session where we provide advice and counsel, legal advice and counsel to the board as to how this would affect the board's role in providing that training. But we are not prepared to do a legal analysis of the case to the public at large. The case is available for the public to read. It's a published matter. So again, I think there was a misconception or misunderstanding, and I didn't even see us on the agenda. So I apologize to program staff about that. But yeah, we're not prepared to do a legal analysis of a Supreme Court case that on its face does not have any direct bearing to this board's providing training for constables to perform work for the judiciary. But again, if you don't agree, and if you would like some legal advice and counsel as to going forward and how this affects your role, we would be able to provide that, again, in an executive session or in a private memorandum, a legal memorandum to the board.
So if I understand you right, then, Solicitor, basically what you're saying is we teach the program, we teach the judicial what our mission is, and anything outside of that, your position is we should not comment on that.
No, my position is as counsel to the agency and to the board, I have to be very careful about the legal advice that I do provide. And if I view this as a bit outside of my bailiwick, I don't feel comfortable doing that. If we're in a private counseling session, I would answer anything the board wanted to talk about, but not to make public statements about a Supreme Court case if I cannot really justify that it has a direct bearing on this board's role. It's the public aspect of it, and it is sort of encroaching or getting outside of what I view as my role as providing legal counsel to the board and to the agency.
Deborah, if I could interject in here, this is Sherry. The question came up during public voice at the August meeting, and where a constable had challenged whether or not Commonwealth versus Legree was even valid good law.
If it had been over.
if it had been overturned or repealed. That was what was going to legal counsel for a decision, to come back to the board and say, yes, Commonwealth versus Legree is still good law.
Right, John Bruno here.
I understand your position on that, but again, my advice to the board doesn't necessarily encroach on the instructor's advice in terms of what is taught in the classes and the courses there. If someone has a complaint about what is taught in the courses, I don't think I'm in the position to legislate that, to say it's okay to teach this course because it's good law or it's not good law. Someone could shepherdize it and determine whether or not it's still good law on the books. But the problem with this is you can interpret it as simply that, but that is really not what it is. Someone is asking for an analysis of the Supreme Court decision. And whether or not it is good law, what people are really asking for is whether or not it has application to the classes we teach, to the decisions that the board makes. That involves a level of legal analysis that I would do with the board in an executive session or in a private legal memo. But again, because what I have to do is sometimes the way the question is asked of me, I understand that is not really the answer that I have to give. The question is not whether or not it is still good law. The question is whether or not the way the board applies it, the way the classes are taught, whether or not that is in concert with any legal analysis of this case. And that's not for public consumption.
John Bruno here, Deborah. So your original, I guess, response to us was you would in fact look into this and present it to us, the answer, if we so requested. Am I correct?
Right. And again, my apology is for not really noticing that we were on this public forum to provide this update. We can talk about it, gloves off, feet up in a private session.
I would like that. Greg?
You okay?
Yeah, I would like to answer that.
And
All right,
going
in
forward.
the course of that, Mr. Chairman, if in the course of that, we were able to extrapolate some things out from our advice to you and determine that these are things that we could discuss in public, we could do that. But what we also do not do is we just do not interpret legal cases for the public. We don't do that. That's outside of our role and outside of our role under the Commonwealth Attorneys Act. So I'm just trying to stay within a particular lane. But there's virtually nothing that I would not say to the board in a private session.
Okay, Counselor, point well taken. Thank you.
All right, so what do? We need a motion here to have her.
No, she'll just follow up. Well, okay. Staff follow up then with the.
Okay, all right.
Counsel on that.
Thank you, Deborah.
All right. Thank you, Counselor. So I'll move on to the next informational item, which is Veterans Affairs approval of basic training. Sean Fowle.
So Tracy and I have been working with the Veterans Military Affairs people. They're the VA approving authority here in Pennsylvania for VA approved programs. In fact, yesterday I was working, so we initially submitted, we met with them and submitted a bunch of information about the program, mainly our training schedule that we published every year that has, the actual schedule. It has all the requirements, who can take training, it has course descriptions. So keep in mind the VA's approach, a lot of this is geared towards, say, a college, a veteran going to a college class. So we have to have this training schedule has to meet, and this catalog, as they refer to it, has to have certain things in it to be approved. So they gave us a checklist, and in fact, yesterday I spent a lot of time going back down through taking this year's training schedule and mocking up what else additional information we have to put in. One of the things we're going to have is basically all the board regulations, because the VA has very specific rules. You have to have, if there's money involved, you have to have a refund policy. We don't have it. We're going to have to develop one, get that approved. You have to have all your attendance and no-show, all those kind of policy, what happens if a guy drops out halfway through the course. And a lot of that's covered by board regulation, but that has to be part of the training schedule, the course catalog. They have very specific things. It's probably going to add about 15 or more pages to our training schedule. The other thing too is because the individual would pay for the basic training now, how this would generally work is, first thing, the constable, if they're a veteran, have to contact the VA and they have to get a certificate of eligibility. And what that says is that they have benefits left that the VA will pay for the training. So even if we go through all this and get it as approved program, that's not a guarantee. It's a case-by-case basis on that individual veteran. It depends on when you served and what GI Bill, you were eligible for, and then whether or not you have benefits left. So a constable can apply to the VA and say, hey, I need a certificate of eligibility, and they can come back and say, you're not eligible anymore. A good example is prior to 9/11 was the GI Montgomery bill. A lot of those benefits for most individuals, if you didn't use it within 10 years of leaving service, it disappears. So depending, and that's where it's going to differ. Even if we get the program approved, it may not work out for every individual veteran based on when they served and what they were eligible for and how much did they use any of their benefits or not. So it's going to be a kind of a lengthy process here into 23, working with the VA to get this approved. So we got to resubmit this catalog back to them and see if we can get it approved. So
any projection timeline, how far?
I would say sometime in 23, because the other thing, we have to work out the mechanism because the VA would pay the program directly. So let's say you get a certificate of eligibility, you're approved, the VA is going to pay for the program. We would have to provide all the documentation that the guy's enrolled and takes the training. We have to then provide that after the fact. And then the VA, pays the program for the course. So we still have to would have to work out how does that mechanism work. So there's a lot of groundwork that has to be put in place.
And I'd just like to point out too to the board as well, we've had probably less than 6 inquiries about the GI Bill and the veterans benefits. 3 of those have already paid to go to basic training. So there is going to be a lot of work involved for the future, and it will be set up for the future, but I don't know that the individuals that initially inquired about it are going to be able to
benefit from it.
Yeah, benefit from it. But it will be done for the future, but it is a small percentage.
Any board member questions for Mr. Fowle about the program? Okay, hearing none, and then on our agenda of other business. So does the board or staff have any other business they want to bring up at this time? All right, then we'll move to public voice. And at this point, we'll open the floor to the public voice section. Each person who requested to comment prior to the meeting will be announced separately. Please keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. If you have no public comments or questions, please indicate so. And Tracy Beaver has a list of the constables ahead of time that had registered to speak during public voice. So I'll have you call out their name. And if they want to comment, please, at that point, take advantage. If you say you have no comment, let us know that, and she can move on to the next constable.
The first constable is David Neller out of Lebanon County.
David Neller, do you have any comment?
Yes. I had put multiple times on the critiques for our training to have a course on how to file a judicial conduct board complaint. The constables are the first line of defense for misconduct by magisterial district judges. On average, the Judicial Conduct Board receives 775 complaints a year about district judges, and I think it would be very beneficial to have a course on how to properly file a complaint. Also, I would like to see a policy on cheating. So far this year, there's been at least 3 constables in the Temple network that have cheated on the training exams, 2 of which are still certified. They still continue to work. I know, like when the state police cheating scandal stuff happened, all the cadets, got removed. Will probably never be a police officer again. But somehow constables who cheat during their certification exams are allowed to continue and work as constables. And, it really takes away from the integrity of our profession when that happens. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Constable Cowler. And those points will be taken up with staff. And Tracy, our next constable.
The second constable is Terry White out of York County.
Terry White, are you on the line?
I am on the line. So I have 3 quick things. I would just want to bring it to the board's attention 2 training grievances I have filed. One was the 302 grievance that PCCD has revised the current Con Ed for, and then the mandate of training for constables. I would like the board to address that. If they haven't seen it, I'm more than happy to provide them a copy of it. The other thing I just noticed while sitting here listening to it, I believe the sections for the continuing education, the waiver that y'all are talking about, section 43.1.33 and 43.1.34 look to be the continuing education sections and not the basic waiver sections. So I just would like for y'all to check that out, make sure I'm not reading it wrong, but
That is correct. Both sections, the continuing education waivers were removed in the first drafts of the board regulation changes that the board approved at the August meeting. And the changes for this meeting brought to the board were just in relation to the law enforcement waiver.
I stand corrected on that one then, and that's my time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Beaver, next.
The third one is Correll Phillips out of Crawford County.
Correll Phillips, are you on the line, sir? Okay, not here.
Okay, and then the last one is Constable Dan Hollenbaugh out of Adams County.
Constable Hollenbaugh.
Yes. Good morning, board. So I've kind of, I don't know, a crazy idea I'd like to propose to the board for your review or your ideas. As you guys know, over the last few years, guys and girls know over the last few years, constables on a whole across the Commonwealth have attempted to reach out to the legislative bodies to get Constable Professionalism Acts, new laws passed to make the office of the constable a bit more professional with oversight and accountability. Those have kind of fallen flat on their faces. And I was speaking to my local representative, and we brought up an interesting idea. As of right now, pretty much one of the only checks, so to speak, of constables before training is the firearms portion. If a constable signs up for firearms qualification and they have a negative remark, they are not authorized to attend the training. My understanding is that the current way that constables enroll in training is a policy and not a law under Title 44. And what I mean by that is a constable can sign up for both basic training and firearms training separately, as well as continuing education and firearms updates separately. In order to better professionalize the Office of the Constable and allow at least some sort of oversight, my opinion would be the board could change their policy and require that when constables sign up for training, that while the 2 trainings could still remain separate, that they are combined in some way that would require the constable to have a FBI fingerprint check or whatever background check you do on constables for both portions, meaning if the firearms portion was somehow connected with the basic training portion, at minimum, you would be able to not allow a constable who had any kind of thing on their record for Lattenberg agreement, domestic violence or things like that, to not at least required to get the certification, the basic certification, not just the firearms. While that would not limit their ability to hold the office in any way, at least that would be one check or one sort of oversight that could be placed upon the office of the constable to help professionalize it, where all constables would be required to have firearms training and all constables would be required to have that background check. That's all I have.
Okay. Thank you. We'll have staff and take a look at that policy and the legislative requirements, and we'll see if anything can be done in that arena. It's going to take some research, probably some time before we get back to you on that, Dan. I appreciate your comments.
Well, if I could just add right now, Chair, it is currently in the board regulations that in order to attend firearms certification, that you cannot be precluded under state or federal law. So that's where we do the background checks prior to the basic firearms class. But there's nothing in the regulations. We have no policy per se that we run background checks in any other situation other than firearms. So it would require a legislative change to the regulations in order to do that.
Right.
And if I can add, that might actually, Constable, be something that you may want to address on an individual county basis. For example, in my county, we require all constables to have a background check, child clearances before they even are approved by the president judges to be on their authorized list of certified constables to perform court services. So, if you're looking at different approaches, maybe that would be just a suggested approach, is instead of going legislatively, you may want to do that on a local basis, district by district. I think you have more control there through the individual counties.
Thank you,
I
Trish.
understand completely what you're saying. I guess my question, if I can just elaborate just a little bit more, is there anything at all outside of legislative action that the board has any control over to say that when a constable signs up for training, that he has to sign up individually for firearms and basic training? Is that a policy or is that a law? My understanding it wasn't a law. My understanding is it was policy. So if it is a policy or a regulation that just PCCD has, then
Well,
that
first of
policy
all-
or regulation could be. Sure.
First of all, they would have, you have to be certified in order to attend a firearms class. So the basic training would have to come first. And there's nothing currently in the regulations that gives us any teeth to do a background check when they come in from basic training. So it would have to be a legislative change.
Yeah.
Right. I understand what you're saying. There's nothing currently in law that says that a constable has to requires any kind of a background check whatsoever before signing up for the basic training. What I'm trying to say is, I'll be straight with you guys. It's just kind of a sneaky way around trying to require constables to be professional. Is there any way to combine the two trainings, which would then de facto require a background check before a constable were to attend either of the trainings?
No, it's legislatively right now, there is no requirement to be firearms certified. So you can get a certification number to serve judicial process without the use of a firearm, because legislatively that was how it was written. Mr. Fowler.
Well, and I was going to say, Dan, so the act says the board has to make, a program and policy for firearms certification and qualification. So in the board's policy, we rely on already existing statute that you can't be a convicted felon and, have a firearm. So the board basically just went with existing statute when it comes to firearms and possession, et cetera. So I think the issue is there's nothing out there that says you can't be a certified constable if, you have these types of offenses. If that was there, then yes, we could do the background check prior. But
The issue is we would need a basis to be able to do that background check for the 80-hour basic. So that's one of the issues is legislatively. Trish, on her point, the other problem that we have is not all the counties have adopted the Supreme Court recommendations back in 2013 to have an approved list. So if I am a constable and I got issues, I travel to another county to work. And if I go to that county that does not have an approved list, very easily I can go to work and maybe have issues that may have precluded me in my own county, but I was able to go somewhere else where they didn't have an approved list. So that's kind of the dilemma we're in. Really, it's I believe it's a legislative fix is what needs to happen in order to clean this whole thing up.
I agree, but unfortunately, I believe that the legislative body in the Commonwealth isn't really interested in addressing those legislative issues. We've attempted numerous times, so thank you, though.
I agree. Thank you. All right, man, I appreciate it. Ms. Beaver, anybody else on the list?
No one else, Chair.
Do we have anybody in the public that has not registered with us that wants to speak at this time?
Yes, Chairman Westover, I would like to speak if I could, a quick question and a comment. This is Bob Dando. My certification is B004742 from London Grove Township. Now, I appreciate the call. This is my first one, and I just finished my basic training in October, early October, and question, they were talking about continuing education. If we had just completed our certification this year, are we still required to do the continuing ed, or would that start next year?
That would start next year, right? Correct. Am I correct in that, Kyle? Yeah.
Right. So you're currently certified through December of next year because you completed basic this year. So you would start your Con Ed in 23.
Yeah, automatically you'll get a certification card with your new date. I know that's what confuses guys because they go through basic this year. They have a cert card that says they expire on 12/31 of 2022. But in fact, because you did do basic this year, you will automatically get a card sent out to you that's going to show the new date of 12/31 of 2023. Okay?
That is correct.
Okay, that's good. That was I saw that. I just got my card last week. And the comment I had real quick, and I apologize because I didn't ask to speak, but this is my first call. I appreciate all the talk around the cost of training and everything else. And just from a perspective for somebody that has just gone through this, it's about, I got a spreadsheet here I'm looking at, around $4,500 for a new constable to lay out before $1 is able to be earned. And I was actually going to try and do the firearms training that's going on now, but just didn't have the money. So I did reach out to my local rep as well, but as far as two concerns, one is the overall cost, upfront cost. And secondly, if the costs continue to go up, it could keep people from participating in the judicial side of the constable work because it is just prohibitive in cost. So I appreciate when we were talking about reaching out to the General Assembly and trying to work that end of it prior to continuing to raise costs. And I appreciate and understand all the conversation in the very beginning, but I just thought I'd add that perspective as far as gear, training, insurance, and that doesn't even include a car. I'm at $4,400 so far, which I haven't signed up or paid for the firearms training yet, but I thought I'd throw that out there as a little different perspective from somebody that's just getting started in this. So,
I appreciate your comment. And like I said, in 1994, how many years ago was that, John? Very quickly? 28 years. So we're still running on a $5 surcharge for 1994. And we saw what inflation just this past year was, and inflation since 94. So you can see why our cost, why our fund has been ate up by, the continuing rising cost of training. So, that's a dilemma we're in, but I appreciate it. And I appreciate you coming through and getting certified. So I look forward to seeing it, meeting you in person at some point. Okay.
Well, we did actually. You were my instructor. So anyway,
okay.
I appreciate
I didn't catch your last. Yeah, I didn't catch your last name when, okay. All right, now I remember.
Thank
Very
you.
good.
Appreciate the time. Take care.
All right. Anybody else for public comment? Public voice.
This is Constable Fitting out of Adams County.
Okay, what's your cert number, please?
B004589.
Okay, very good. Go ahead.
I just wanted to touch base on training. I just had some insight that I'd like to throw out there. First and foremost, I appreciate the board and the time. I appreciate what the board does for us. One of the things I just wanted to bring up was I'd really like to see some sort of incentive for good quality constables to get back into some sort of teaching role. While I respect the individuals who were just voted in for instructors, I'd really like to see the board to figure out some sort of incentive to get guys and gals that are actually doing the job day in and day out back in front of the new constables. It really provides teamwork. It allows great networking, and it really gives a real world experience. For instance, I don't know anything. I shouldn't say anything, but I wouldn't go to expect to teach Title 18 because I don't dabble in that. The common response from municipal police and troopers when it comes down to anything civil is call a constable, that's civil, yet we're having them come up here to teach. And while I respect and appreciate what they do for the Commonwealth, I think it would also be wise for us to look internally rather than externally all the time and make that list of guys and gals that are like-minded, that really share that common goal to get good certified constables. I mean, there's a core group of us that are really looking at trying to professionalize this. I mean, this is our full-time jobs, and we do want good certified people up there. So I really would just appreciate that the board really consider looking internally and developing a good core list of individuals who are constables that are reputable, that they can say, hey, look, let's see if there'd be some sort of incentive, or at least let's reach out to see if we can put something together. You know, you have like-minded people like Alex Verganis. He's a great instructor and he does the job. So he knows a lot of that stuff. And that's just my 2 cents on it. While I appreciate everything the board does, I would really just like to see a lot of that stuff internally as well. And I'll hold my time, and I appreciate the ability to comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Constable. Anybody else? Okay, hearing none, then we will move. I believe we have an executive session scheduled. The purpose of the session is
Personnel issues and possible litigation.
personnel issues and litigation. So at this point, the board will move into executive session so we can have those. And after that's over, then we'll be moving to adjournment, correct?
Correct.
All right, there'll be no further action or anything after that?
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay, very good. So at this point, we will cease transmission of the meeting and we'll move into executive session. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.